Okay, let's unpack this. For decades, when you thought corporate security, you thought about the physical perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
You thought about two technological behemoths that really define the boundaries of the enterprise network: Active Directory and the virtual private
They
network.
were the pillars, yeah.
They were the unshakable pillars. They were quite literally the castle walls and the deep protective moat around your data center.
And that perimeter is gone. I mean, that entire security model, the idea that anything inside the network is implicitly trustworthy, is fundamentally dead.
It's just obsolete.
It just collapsed under the pressure of hybrid work, massive cloud application adoption, and, like sophisticated attackers who treat the network boundary as nothing more than a minor speed bump.
Exactly. The old tools that we relied on, AD controlling access to file shares, the VPN creating that encrypted tunnel back to the office,
Yeah,
they're not just outdated. They are now strategic liabilities.
they really are.
They are frequently the biggest point of failure in many modern security architectures.
Yeah.
And we've seen some frightening evidence of this. Attackers are specifically exploiting VPN vulnerabilities at an alarming and, frankly, accelerating rate.
Oh, yeah.
We are talking about a 47% increase in discovered VPN vulnerabilities in 2023 alone. That turns these necessary gateways into enormous exposed targets.
And what's fascinating here is that the architectural concept of trust has flipped entirely. It's no longer about securing a location or an IP address range. It's about securing an identity. The goal of this deep dive is to, meticulously map this massive, painful, and ultimately necessary architectural shift for the learner.
And we do mean meticulous. Our mission today is threefold. First, we're going to dive deep into the architectural dichotomy Active Directory versus the new Microsoft Entra ID and why they are fundamentally different creatures.
Very different.
Second, we will fully explain why the traditional VPN model enables catastrophe and how the philosophy of zero trust renders it obsolete. And finally, we're going to get specific about the modern solution, Microsoft's Zero Trust Network Access Platform, called Global Secure Access, specifically focusing on how Entra Private Access is designed to replace the traditional VPN for every single modern hybrid workload you have.
And this transition, it's so much more than a technical upgrade for system administrators. It's a fundamental paradigm change in security philosophy.
Right.
It moves the ultimate control from the network firewall to the identity layer, which is now the new, dynamic, and logical perimeter. By the end of this deep dive, you should understand not only what these systems are, but why they force a strategic rethink for every organization.
All right, so let's start with the confusing part, because this space has been riddled with marketing and rebranding decisions that felt more like obfuscation than clarity.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly.
We need to clear up the naming conventions first. Azure Active Directory became Microsoft Entra ID in July 2023. Why? I mean, Microsoft stated they wanted to simplify the secure access experience and align the identity component with the broader Entra product line, which focuses on governance and permissions.
And ironically, as the sources note, the name change caused a huge amount of confusion.
Right?
Because Azure Active Directory sound exactly like Active Directory but in the cloud, when in reality they are built for fundamentally different eras and rely on completely incompatible underlying architectures.
So just to be crystal clear for everyone listening,
Yeah.
the technical distinction between the old Azure AD and the new Microsoft Entra ID is merely the name.
It's just the name. They're the same service. The critical foundational distinction is between on-premises Active Directory and cloud-native Entra ID.
I think the analogy we found in the sources really captures the essence of this difference in design philosophy. It compares Active Directory to a reliable 2001 Subaru Outback.
Chuckles. Okay, I like that.
It works, it's robust, it's been the backbone of IT for decades, and sysadmins can operate it in their sleep. It handles the core necessary functions that, keep the lights on inside the office.
And if Active Directory is the reliable workhorse Subaru, then Entra ID is the Tesla.
Exactly. The sources call it powerful, overwhelming at first, brimming with features you didn't know you needed, but capable of fundamentally changing the world or destroying it if it's misconfigured.
That's a good point.
The management interface is completely different, the concepts are new, and it requires a total relearning from the old AD console. But the payoff is massive capability that works globally.
So let's nail down that foundation. Active Directory, or AD, we're talking about Windows domain services, the digital gatekeepers, and the central nervous system of the on-premise network.
The key word there being on-premise.
Absolutely. It's built for control when you have physical access to the environment.
That's right. The core purpose of AD is hyper-focused on managing internal, domain-joined resources, think desktops, printers, local file shares, and legacy applications that live exclusively within the physical walls of the corporate data center.
A closed-loop system by design.
Totally.
It achieves this control through the domain controller, which is the central authority, and it relies on time-tested but fundamentally network-sensitive protocols. The big ones are Kerberos and NTLM.
Right.
When a user logs into their work computer, AD verifies those credentials against the domain controller database. Crucially, these protocols assume the network link is trusted and low latency, which makes them really poorly suited for the public internet.
And its control mechanism is famously rigid but highly structured.
Absolutely. That's the hierarchical structure of organizational units, or OUs, and domains. This system allowed for incredible granularity in applying authorization policies through group policy objects, or GPOs.
Ah, GPOs.
Think of GPOs as the administrative muscle memory of the organization.
Can you give us a detailed example of a classic GPO in action? Something that everyone who has managed AD has touched.
Certainly, a classic GPO might be configured specifically to enforce security settings across all machines in a particular OU. For instance, requiring a complex 12-character password change every 60 days.
It's dangerous stuff.
Or disabling USB drive access across the entire sales department. Or preventing standard users from accessing specific system tools like the registry editor to maintain stability.
Right, so very granular control, but only on that local network.
The strength of AD lies in its comprehensive, structured control over resources that live inside the company's walls, providing a deterministic and centralized view of the local infrastructure.
Okay, now let's look at the cloud-native evolution. Microsoft Entra ID. If AD is structured like a rigid corporate hierarchy, how is Entra ID built?
Entra ID is fundamentally different. It's not an on-prem solution ported to the cloud. It's a cloud-native identity as a service, an ideas platform, built for scale, performance, and decentralization.
And its primary environment.
It's cloud-based, a multi-tenant service managed globally by Microsoft.
And its purpose moves beyond internal file shares.
Significantly beyond. Its core purpose is managing secure, dynamic access to external and cloud applications. We're talking about the entire SaaS ecosystem.
Not just Microsoft 365.
Oh, no. Microsoft 365, yes. But also every other major business application, Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, Slack, GitHub. Anywhere your organization consumes a cloud service, Entra ID is designed to be the central identity broker.
And because it lives on the public internet, it can't rely on those older network-sensitive protocols like Kerberos.
That's correct. It uses completely modern, secure, REST-based protocols that are intrinsically designed to handle internet-scale, high-latency, untrusted connections.
Things like...
These include SAML, OAuth 2.0, and OpenID Connect. And this shift enables critical features that are now table stakes for security. Multi-factor authentication, MFA required for every user, passwordless logins using hardware tokens or biometrics, and the indispensable feature of single sign-on, or SSO, across the organization's entire cloud stack.
So we have the network-centric Subaru running locally and the identity-centric Tesla running globally. If I'm a listener running both, I'm thinking, how do I bridge the gap?
That's the hybrid reality, and it's the default state for most large enterprises.
Right, nobody's ripping and replacing overnight.
No way. They still require that on-premise AD foundation for legacy systems, but they are heavily invested in Entra ID for cloud systems. The bridge is critical.
So how does that bridge, something like Entra Connect v2, ensure identity consistency?
Entra Connect v2, or the newer Entra Cloud Sync, are those critical synchronization tools. They don't copy the entire AD database. What they do is securely take the user identities, usernames, credential hashes.
Using a technology called password hash synchronization, or PHS.
Exactly, PHS. And group memberships. They take that from the on-prem AD and synchronize them up to Entra ID.
So the user's identity effectively have two homes, but it's treated as one.
Precisely. The master identity might still live in AD, but the synchronized copy in Entra ID allows for seamless authentication to cloud resources. This means one set of credentials, managed primarily in AD, grants access to the local file server and the global Microsoft Teams application.
So this hybrid setup, it isn't a temporary workaround.
No, it's a necessary long-term strategy for blending the deterministic control of the past with the flexible reach of the cloud, all based on a single, unified corporate identity.
That seems like a critical distinction. The security boundary has officially moved from the physical LAN cable to that synchronized identity profile.
Absolutely. The decision engine has relocated. AD dictates if you are allowed in the building. Entra ID dictates if you are allowed to use the applications, regardless of which building, physical or digital, you are standing in.
Okay, so now we shift our focus to the second foundational technology that has become a dangerous bottleneck, the traditional VPN.
Right.
For 20 years, it was the remote worker's lifeline. You clicked the button, entered your credentials, and bam, you were virtually sitting back in the office.
And that model, while convenient for a time, has catastrophic flaws in the modern distributed world. It relies on a security assumption, implicit trust, that attackers routinely exploit.
If Active Directory was the bouncer for the internal network, the VPN was the heavily armored drawbridge over the moat.
Good analogy.
Once that drawbridge lowered and you authenticated, what access did you immediately gain?
That's the inherent flaw, the all-or-nothing approach. A traditional VPN grants broad network-level access. You are given an internal IP address, placing you logically inside the corporate network.
You're on the LAN.
You're on the LAN. And this means the connected device often gains visibility into entire IP ranges, multiple VLANs, and various internal servers they absolutely do not need to access for their job function.
I see the distinction now. If I only need to check my expense reports, why should my device be able to see the database server hosting HR records?
Exactly. This enables what we call lateral movement. This is the single most defining characteristic of modern ransomware and nation-state attacks.
Okay, break that down.
If an attacker compromises a user's device through phishing or malware, and that device is connected via the VPN tunnel,
Right.
the attacker suddenly has a high-speed trusted lane to scan the entire internal network, map vulnerabilities, escalate privileges, and then jump from the compromised endpoint to sensitive databases, development environments, or domain controllers.
So the VPN, which was designed for connectivity.
It inadvertently facilitates the propagation of the attack across the corporate infrastructure.
And we can't overlook the fact that the VPN gateways themselves are massive, exposed attack surfaces sitting right there on the public internet, just inviting trouble.
They're literal beacons for threat actors. Since they terminate all remote connections, they hold the keys to the kingdom. We mentioned the staggering 47% increase in discovered vulnerabilities in 2023.
It's a huge number.
Attackers are specifically weaponizing zero-day or recently disclosed flaws in various vendor VPN software. They use these flaws to bypass authentication, establish persistence, and steal valid session cookies, often before the organization even has time to patch.
So if the gateway goes down, the whole remote workforce is locked out.
And if it's compromised, the entire organization is compromised.
Beyond security, what about the daily operational pain points that VPNs introduce?
The performance and cost issues are also substantial. Traditional VPNs often route all internet-bound traffic, even traffic destined for external SaaS apps like Microsoft 365 or YouTube back through the corporate data center for inspection before sending it back out to the internet.
That hairpin turn.
We call that traffic backhauling or hairpinning. It creates significant latency, especially for global teams. It also exhausts hardware resources on expensive, specialized VPN concentrators and firewalls, forcing constant, costly upgrades and operational overhead managing access control lists, ACLs.
And the result for the user is just slow.
Slow user experience, drop sessions, and a system that simply wasn't designed for a cloud-first world.
So if the solution isn't patching the VPN, it's ditching the implicit trust model entirely and adopting a strategy that assumes failure is inevitable. This is zero trust.
Zero Trust, or ZT, is the only viable path forward. It is a security strategy and architecture, famously distilled by Forrester Research, which operates on the mantra, never trust, always verify.
And that means?
It demands that every single access request from a remote employee, a local desktop, or a server be evaluated as though it originated from an uncontrolled network.
Let's detail the three core principles that form the foundation of zero trust architecture, because these are the operational commands for the new identity perimeter.
The first pillar is verify explicitly. This is the direct challenge to the old VPN model. Trust is never granted based on network location or even an initial login password.
Okay.
You must always authenticate and authorize based on all available data points and identity signals.
What kind of signals are we talking about? Give us the intelligence briefing.
We're talking about combining real-time inputs. The system looks at the user's identity. Are they who they say they are? Their geographic location. Are they logging in from a country we've blocked or an impossible travel location? The health and compliance status of their device, Is it running the latest OS patch? Does it have required security software? The application sensitivity. Are they accessing finance data or a public blog?
And the risk score.
And most critically, any real-time risk assessments provided by identity protection services. Every decision is contextual.
So you're building a comprehensive risk score for every single access attempt before the gate opens even an inch.
Exactly. The second pillar is use least privileged access. This is the countermeasure to lateral movement. Users are strictly limited to the minimum set of permissions required for their current immediate task.
How do you enforce that?
We enforce this through techniques like just-in-time, or JIT, and just-enough access, JEA models, ensuring administrative or high-risk permissions are not permanent standing access. They activate only on demand and expire quickly.
And the third, which we touched on earlier, is the necessity of constant preparedness.
Assume breach. You have to. You must design defensive strategies assuming that an attacker is already inside the environment, or will get in soon. This shifts the focus from simple prevention to minimizing the impact, the blast radius of any successful breach.
And you do that with?
Techniques here include micro-segmentation, ensuring that even if one application is compromised, the attacker cannot pivot to another. Pervasive encryption of data, and continuous analytics to detect threats in real time before they spread across the network.
This philosophy brings us back squarely to Entra ID. If we assume the network is hostile, then the identity must become the control mechanism.
That's the core realization. Identity is the logical perimeter now, and the enforcement engine for this new logical perimeter is conditional access policies.
The policy brain.
Conditional access is the policy brain of the Entra ID ecosystem. It takes the zero trust philosophy and turns it into executable rules.
This is where we write the highly complex if-then-else statements of access. Walk us through a more complex CA scenario to really drive home the granularity.
Okay, let's look at a scenario that combines several signals. Suppose we have a CA policy targeting the organization's high-sensitivity CRM application.
Right.
The policy states, if a user is a member of the executive team group and they are attempting to sign in from outside the corporate geographic boundaries, say a high-risk country detected by Entra ID protection.
Okay, so a lot of conditions already.
Right. Then access is not simply denied. Instead, the policy dictates they must fulfill two requirements. They must provide MFA, and they must use a mobile device that is marked as compliant by Intune.
Meaning the device has proper encryption, PIN, and is free of jailbreaks.
Exactly. And else, if they fail either of those conditions, they are blocked entirely. This level of dynamic, context-aware risk assessment is the essence of the new firewall.
The beauty of that is that the policy isn't static, right? The access decision changes based on real-time factors, like the risk score, assigned by Entra ID protection, which might flag a user behavior as anomalous.
Precisely. If the system detects behavior that suggests token theft or credential misuse, the risk score spikes, and conditional access immediately enforces a more restrictive policy, say, requiring a password change and re-enrolling MFA, or it simply blocks access until the risk is remediated.
So this granular continuous verification, it just renders the traditional implicit trust VPN obsolete.
It does, because the control is at the application and identity layer, not the network door.
We've established the architectural foundation, which is Entra ID, and the security philosophy, Zero Trust. So now let's talk about the specific infrastructure Microsoft is using to execute this plan and replace that legacy VPN gateway, Global Secure Access, or GSA.
GSA is the unifying term for Microsoft's Security Service Edge, or SSE, solution. And SSE is a transformative new category that converges network, identity, and endpoint controls into a single cloud-delivered identity-aware platform.
It's a good concept.
It is. It handles the secure routing of all your traffic.
So if Entra ID manages the identity and the policy, how does Microsoft manage the actual traffic flow, both external and internal, that used to rely on our local network firewalls and VPNs?
That's where GSA splits its functionality into two core components to cover all traffic types. First, you have Microsoft Entra Internet Access.
Okay.
This functions as the Identity-Aware Secure Web Gateway, or SWG. This component handles all traffic destined for the public internet and SaaS apps. It filters, blocks malicious content, prevents data loss, and enforces policies even for sites not federated with Entra ID.
So it's protecting the user when they're out browsing the hostile external world.
Exactly. And the second component is the direct replacement for the traditional VPN.
This is the big one.
That is Microsoft Entra Private Access. This is the core Zero Trust Network Access, or ZTNA, component. It's what we call ZTNA 2.0. Its job is to provide secure, highly granular, identity-based access to internal resources, meaning internal IP addresses and fully qualified domain names, or FQDNs.
What kind of internal resources are we talking about?
Crucially, it secures any private resource, port, or protocol. We're not just talking about internal web apps running on HTTPS.
This is legacy stuff, too.
Yeah. Private access supports standard PCP-based applications today, and UDP support is rapidly maturing. This is what allows remote users to securely connect to private legacy apps, shared folders, RDP sessions, or any service, whether it lives on-premises, in a specific data center, or spread across a multi-cloud environment.
So if it's replacing the VPN, how does the architecture fundamentally solve the VPN's greatest weakness, that massive exposed gateway?
This is the architectural genius, and where the security posture improves dramatically. Entra Private Access uses an outbound-only connector.
Okay, what's that?
An administrator installs a lightweight piece of software, the Private Network Connector, which runs on a standard Windows Server 2012 R2, or later on a dedicated server inside their on-premise network. This connector initiates an outbound secure tunnel connection to the nearest intra-cloud point of presence.
Okay, wait, so the organization's network is reaching out to the Microsoft cloud, rather than the cloud or the user reaching in.
Exactly. The organization does not have to open a single inbound firewall port to the public internet for remote access. This is a complete security posture reversal.
That's huge.
Your internal resources become effectively invisible and untargetable to outsiders attempting reconnaissance or brute forcing a gateway. The Security Decision Trust Compliance MFA is handled entirely by Entra ID, drastically reducing the organization's external attack surface compared to a legacy VPN concentrator listening on port 443.
And since we're leveraging conditional access, we've moved past the VPN's implicit trust model.
That's the ZTNA core. Unlike a VPN that grants broad access to the entire network once you are connected, private access offers per-app adaptive access.
Meaning?
You only see the specific application or resource you are authorized for and nothing more. This microsegmentation limits the user's exposure to the rest of the network, preventing lateral movement right from the start.
Let's get into the practical application. We need to detail the use cases where private access truly shines, especially in modernizing access to those deeply legacy applications we used to rely on VPNs for.
Our first classic scenario is essential for IT admins and support staff. Secure Remote Desktop Protocol Access, or RDP. This is connecting to a terminal server or an admin jump box, typically running on TCP port 3389.
Okay, walk us through the user experience and the policy enforcement for that.
A remote user, running the GSA client on their Windows 10 or 11 desktop, attempts to RDP to a private FQDN, say, terminal.securecloudexperts.local.
Right.
The GSA client intercepts the traffic and routes the access attempt through the secure GSA cloud tunnel. Crucially, before the session is established, conditional access kicks in. It takes signals from the user's identity and device.
So the security check happens at the identity layer, not at the network layer.
Precisely. CA enforces MFA for that specific RDP connection. The user sees a modern pop-up window requiring them to complete their MFA challenge, a phone notification, a biometric scan. Only once the user is explicitly verified and their device is compliant is the connection established, securely routed through the private access connector to the target terminal server. This is a massive modernization over trying to apply static IP-based rules or relying on older Azure MFA extensions.
That makes RDP access zero trust compliant. But let's tackle the technical elephant in the room: file shares. This is historically the most challenging legacy application for cloud-native devices to access remotely.
This is truly the most impressive technical hurdle GSA overcomes, accessing on-premises file shares using SMB server message block, which runs on port 445.
And the challenge is?
The challenge is this. If a remote device is Entra ID joined cloud managed, not registered in the local Active Directory domain, it lacks the Windows domain trust relationship necessary to obtain a valid Kerberos ticket for the local file server.
So the file server doesn't recognize the device's cloud credentials. It only trusts the local domain.
Exactly. The file server is still living in the Subaru world, demanding traditional AD authentication. The Entra Private Access Connector solves this through a feature called Hybrid Cloud Kerberos.
Okay.
The connector is installed on a member server within the local AD domain and is configured with specific administrative delegation settings.
So the connector acts as an authorized intermediary.
That's the perfect way to phrase it.
Yeah.
The Entra ID authenticated user attempts to access the file share via the uncpathfile.securecloudexperts.localshare1. The private access connector intercepts this traffic.
Right.
Because the connector itself is a trusted domain-joined server, it is authorized to request a Kerberos service ticket from the local AD domain controller on behalf of the user who was just authenticated via Entra ID.
So the connector translates the modern cloud-verified identity into the legacy domain-required ticket.
It acts as the credential translator and proxy. The local AD grants the ticket to the connector, which then uses it to complete the authentication to the file server. The user gets seamless single sign-on, even from their cloud-only device, while the entire process is wrapped in a zero-trust layer enforcing MFA, device compliance, and per-app granularity that a traditional VPN could never provide for SMB traffic.
That's a powerful modernization without requiring the organization to completely rip out and replace that internal file server infrastructure. It feels like security has finally caught up to the reality of the hybrid environment.
It absolutely has. You are wrapping identity-aware security around old foundations, enabling access to protocols that are decades old via a modern cloud-native mechanism. The system is also used for securing legacy internal web portals and applications this way, ensuring every internal resource gets conditional access protection.
So let's talk about the administrative side. If I'm setting this up, I need to define which resources are being tunneled. You mentioned 2 configuration methods for Entra private access. What are the practical differences?
There are 2 pathways to define the application segments. The simpler method is the Quick Access app. This is designed for the primary group of FQDNs, IP addresses, and essential IP ranges. You always want remote users to tunnel through the GSA service, the critical core resources needed by most of the company.
And the limitation there.
You can only target that single quick access enterprise application with conditional access policies. It's a good starting point for broad coverage, but not for complex security requirements.
Which leads us to the second method for more granular control.
That's the Global Secure Access app, or per-app access. You use this if you need fine-grained control over specific application groups. For example, if the finance application requires MFA and a compliant device, but the internal wiki only needs MFA.
Okay, so you break them apart.
Right. With per-app access, you create multiple enterprise applications within Entra ID, each representing a subset of private resources.
So if I have a critical development server that needs JIT access and a specific geo-blocking rule, I use the Global Secure Access app configuration to isolate it.
Precisely. Each application can have its own tailored set of conditional access policies, allowing for highly complex security matrices. This is vital for organizations handling regulatory compliance or intellectual property that demands specific, temporary, or highly restrictive security rules for subsets of users.
And a final check on the table stakes. To make all this magic happen, the appropriate licensing and administrative roles must be in place.
Absolutely. You require specific administrative roles, Global Secure Access Administrator and Application Administrator within Microsoft Entra ID. And crucially, users accessing these services must be licensed with Microsoft Entra ID P1 or P2, which provides the necessary features like conditional access and Entra ID protection used in the ZTNA framework.
We've built the identity fortress and armed it with ZTNA. But the journey to zero trust is not complete without addressing the endpoint itself.
Not at all.
We have to move away from the traditional concept of an on-prem Active Directory dependency on the device. This is the device transformation.
This transformation is non-negotiable for true ZT adoption. We must understand the 3 device states and why the legacy state is an operational and security burden.
So let's start with the legacy state.
Domain joined. These devices are fully managed by group policy objects, GPOs, requiring network line of sight to the domain controller for updates and policy enforcement.
The GPO headache. If the device isn't on the office network, policies can stagnate.
Exactly. And because it's deeply integrated into the AD fortress model, a compromised device is pre-trusted by the internal network, making it high risk for lateral movement.
Okay, state number 2.
The second state, hybrid joined, is the transitional bridge. It's joined to both AD and Entra ID, supporting both legacy GPOs and modern Intune management. It serves its purpose during the migration phase, allowing organizations to slowly transition off GPOs.
But the ideal zero trust state is end-to-end.
That's the goal. Entra joined devices are purely cloud native, managed exclusively by Microsoft Intune, and work independently via the internet. They achieve the highest level of zero trust compliance because policies are enforced universally, regardless of physical location.
So Intune is pushing everything.
Intune pushes configuration requirements, compliance checks, application distribution, and patching all over the public internet.
And device health becomes a crucial signal for conditional access.
It becomes a critical input. Intune manages the device and generates a statement of health-confirming OS version, encryption status, successful policy application, which is stored in Entra ID.
And then CA checks that.
Right. When a user tries to access a sensitive resource, CA checks that health state. If the device is flagged as non-compliant, say, it hasn't patched, a major security vulnerability access is blocked, preventing the introduction of a vulnerable device into the corporate ecosystem.
This moves us into the ongoing battle against sophisticated threats, because attackers haven't stopped innovating just because we added MFA. They've moved past simple password theft entirely.
We're facing the widespread rise of token theft or session hijacking. Attackers recognized the effectiveness of MFA, so they stopped targeting the password itself. Instead, they focus on stealing the valid session token that is issued after a successful authentication.
And they do that with?
Often via adversary-in-the-middle phishing or malware on the device.
So if they steal the token, they bypass the MFA challenge altogether because the system thinks the user has already authenticated.
That is the terrifying effectiveness of it. The primary refresh token, or PRT, is the most valuable target in the Microsoft ecosystem. Attackers steal this PRT, which is proof that the user authenticated and potentially passed MFA, and they can replay it from their own machine, impersonating the user, and maintaining persistent, authorized access until the token naturally expires.
This sounds like a gaping hole in modern protection. How does Microsoft Entra ID fight back against this sophisticated session hijacking?
With token protection, a critical defense layer. For Entra-registered Windows 10 and 11 devices, Microsoft introduced cryptographic binding.
What does that mean exactly?
Yeah. This means the session token is securely bound to the device's hardware, specifically the Trusted Platform Module, or TPM, a secure crypto processor chip present in most modern professional devices.
So the token is tied physically to that one machine?
Precisely. If an attacker manages to steal the token file and tries to replay it from their own distinct machine, the Entra ID service immediately detects that the hardware signature doesn't match the bound TPM key. The token is immediately rejected as invalid.
Wow.
This defense, cryptographically, hardware backs the identity perimeter, making session replay significantly harder and protecting the organization's high-value tokens.
That shifts the attack requirements from just stealing a digital file to requiring the physical compromise or theft of the entire endpoint device, which is a much higher barrier.
It raises the cost and complexity for the attacker exponentially. It's an essential feature for mitigating credential theft in the zero-trust landscape.
Speaking of high-value targets, let's talk governance and protection for the keys to the kingdom, the global administrators and other privileged roles.
Privileged accounts are the ultimate targets, and here, Entra ID governance enforces least privilege access through privileged identity management, or PIM.
And the core concept there is?
The critical concept PIM enforces is the elimination of standing access.
Explain standing access. Why is it dangerous for an admin to always be a global admin?
If an administrator has standing access, meaning they're logged in with global admin rights 24/7, if their device or user account is compromised, the attacker instantly gains the highest level of authority without any further privilege escalation needed.
So PM gets rid of that.
PM removes this standing access entirely.
So PM implements the just-in-time, or JIT, activation model we discussed earlier. Walk us through a realistic governance workflow for a high-risk task.
Okay, let's use an example. A system administrator needs to troubleshoot a critical synchronization issue, which requires temporary global administrator rights.
Why?
Instead of logging in directly with high privileges, they request role activation through the PIM portal.
What does that request require?
The request is scrutinized by policy. It typically requires three things. First, a new, successful multi-factor authentication challenge, even if the user is already logged in. Second, a business justification entered by the user, like fixing Entra Connect sync error.
And third,
the request might be routed for peer approval, requiring a security manager or another high-level peer to approve the activation before it proceeds.
And once approved,
the system activates the role, granting the global admin privileges, but only for a strictly limited duration, say 4 hours.
and then it's gone.
Once the task is complete or the session duration expires, the permissions automatically deactivate, returning the user to their default low-privilege user state. This practice dramatically reduces the blast radius and the window of opportunity for an attacker to exploit a compromised administrative account.
The strategic picture we've painted is crystal clear. The investment focus must aggressively move from managing legacy perimeter hardware, those old firewalls and VPN concentrators, to investing heavily in cloud-native identity protection, governance, and ZTNA solutions.
Absolutely. The overall impact of adopting ultra-private access, coupled with conditional access in PM, is a more granular, scalable, and inherently more secure solution than traditional VPNs.
And you're shrinking the attack surface.
By removing inbound firewall ports and enforcing per-app access, you are shrinking the attack surface while, paradoxically, improving the user experience through Microsoft's global, high-speed private network backbone.
And as organizations embrace this new philosophy, they must also transition to continuous monitoring and the assumption of breach, leveraging tools to synthesize the vast amounts of telemetry these systems generate.
Right.
Using AI-driven systems to identify anomalies that human eyes would inevitably miss.
The ability to automatically block and flag risky behavior is paramount because, as the sources remind us, cyber attacks happen at cloud speed, and your defense systems, built on identity, must be able to keep pace and respond dynamically.
It's the difference between a reactive legacy system and a proactive zero-trust architecture.
Exactly.
This deep dive has meticulously shown that the conversation around secure corporate access is no longer about static perimeter defense. The old idea of the castle-and-moat is gone, replaced by a distributed dynamic security model where access is constantly earned, never assumed.
That's the key realization that every learner should take away. The perimeter is no longer a physical wall. It is the identity of the user and the health of their device, constantly verified and enforced by conditional access.
And we've learned how the legacy systems fit into the new paradigm. Active Directory remains the necessary core for internal on-prem control. Microsoft Entra ID is the strategic answer for cloud and hybrid control, handling SSO, MFA, and the policy brain globally.
Right.
And the tool that seals the deal, replacing the risky, broad access of traditional VPNs with granular ZTNA, is global secure access and Entra private access.
That shift from network trust to identity verification provides a pathway to modernize even the most stubborn, decades-old legacy systems without exposing them to unnecessary risk.
But if identity is the new firewall, securing human users is only half the battle and possibly the easiest half. We've successfully protected people and their devices. But where does the future of identity protection lead us as organizations rapidly transform?
The sources point to a new frontier driven by the explosive adoption of AI. As organizations integrate autonomous AI models and machine learning agents into their workflow systems that access APIs, databases, sensitive customer data, a whole new type of identity is emerging that also needs governance and security.
Wow.
Microsoft has introduced the concept of Entra ID to manage, govern, and protect these non-human AI agents.
Digital colleagues running alongside us.
Exactly. These AI agents will soon be operating within the corporate infrastructure, needing specific, temporary, and least privileged access to complete their assigned tasks. If identity remains the firewall, how will organizations secure the access rights of these digital colleagues?
A huge question.
How do you ensure least privilege access and enforce JIT principles for an autonomous AI model? This new category of workload identity is exactly where the next most complex chapter of Zero Trust begins. The learner has to remember that security is never static. It adapts to whatever workload comes next, whether it's a remote user or a complex autonomous algorithm.
A profound and slightly unsettling thought to end on. If you're building that identity fortress today, you better start thinking about who else or what else is moving into the castle with you.